Forge the Narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host. We are the Battle of Lost Souls podcast. In this episode, we are going to be going over Codex Astra Militarum. I cannot wait. There's so much cool things on here. You've seen some of them spoiled on the Warhammer community site. We're going to go over some stuff that will release on the day of pre-order. I'm joined tonight by Ricky Addington and Andrew Whitaker.
Hey.
I wish I was dead.
And you'll hear why. No spoilers. Chris Morgan and Horton Dowden.
Live from Battlehaven!
Exclamation mark.
Guys, big Guard fan, I just want to say, I want it to be on record that I've been playing Catechins before it was cool, and that when Mordians are dressed down, they look a lot like Catechins.
I played them, and I thought that your Mordians were Catechins, so they pulled casual off well.
That's a topic we're going to discuss about the whole counts as and stuff. Because I think especially during the early period of this codex, we're going to see a lot of people that are, experimenting with different lists, trying to figure out which regiment is right for them.
Yeah, I give a 30-day grace period in there. After that, I better at least start seeing unpainted models of the appropriate regiment. And
I was just kidding about that. My Catechins will always be Catechins, but long-time player of those guys.
I mean, I think that we do have a serious, it's a question for the community to answer, especially for tournament players, where there's going to be clear winners and losers competitively. I don't think that anyone will debate that certain regiments are going to be the clear, these guys are competitively better than these guys. And when that happens, much like with any of these codexes, there's a model range for Mordians, there's a model range for Vostroyans, there's a model range for Cadians, Catechins, and Valhallans. And it's going to be up to the community to decide whether or not they want to allow a guy to show up to a tournament and say, hey, I know these are Cadian models, or I know that these are Catechin models, but they're actually Mordians. And that's just going to be a thing that
it's a topic. We'll get there. I think that's a decision that people have to come to kind of on their own, what they're cool with. But when I know there's going to be a splash of all that kind of stuff with all these cool new rules, because it is cool. And what you were talking about fringe competitive and what's going to be mainstream competitive, there are ways to build towards all of these regimental doctrines, and we'll go over the ones here on the show today. But I'm going to go through things kind of in order. There are 6 orders still. So if you have voice of command, as some officers do, and somebody's getting it back, again, no spoiler on that too. We'll get to that section in a second. There are 6 orders that you issue to units, and there's still no role. It's just you just get to tell these squads to do things if you're within range.
That's so good.
Yeah, it takes out a step. I mean, you could mitigate the kind of things before, and granted, it was kind of cool. Well, I shouldn't say cool, but it was, it added story elements when you would fail the orders, but now voice of command is orders may be issued to an infantry unit within 6 inches of this unit that have the same regiment keyword as the unit giving the order.
I actually, and I've had this conversation with a few people, I despised the old order mechanism. It was foolish to me. It just was so counter to the fluff, right? Because the old 7th, 6th, 5th edition, harkening back all the way till whenever, the order mechanism was tied to the unit's leadership that was being ordered, which I always took umbrance with, because the vast majority of guard units are leadership 7, which meant there was a 50-50 shot, quite literally 50-50, of whether or not the order was going to be followed. And I just, from a fluff perspective, that always rankled me. How could we have conquered the galaxy if only half the time the soldiers did what they were told to do?
Well,
it was just ridiculous to me.
Extra. This is you're commanding someone. I see both sides, but I see your point too. And the unit can only be affected by 1 order per turn. I think that's a fairly important thing. So, the orders, while some of them are quite good, you can only issue them to once to any particular unit.
I do also have to point out, though, as the only member of the show in the military, our soldiers usually follow our orders only half the time. It's a junior enlisted. They call them the E4 Mafia for a reason. The junior enlisted run the military. We just pretend that we're in charge. So
you're shattering my heroic notion right now, Ricky. I don't know if I can cope with this.
So I think these are all. I think the orders are very similar to what they are in the index, and there's a lot of things here, like rules wise, and for many of the units that is the same as it is in the index. We're going to make some comparisons of things to what the points are in here, and there aren't a ton of changes. But there are some things that are worth mentioning, including some changes, but a lot of the stuff is going to be very similar to what you saw or what you know in the index right now, except Rough Riders.
I don't.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
No, you know what? We're here.
Okay.
Just rip the Band-Aid off. Rip the Band-Aid off.
It's not even a Band-Aid. It's more just like it's like a switchblade. I was knifed. I was basically stabbed in the back, surprisingly. Just
by Colonel Mustard.
For no reason, just murdered. I wish I was dead. I'm very unhappy.
Andrew is a Rough Rider enthusiast, and you know that if you've been listening to the show and you caught the battle report that we just did on the Glacial Geek YouTube channel.
Yeah, enthusiast is a fantastic word. I'm an enthusiast. If that means spending literally hundreds of man hours accumulating out of production models and then hand converting them painstakingly with green stuff. But yeah, enthusiast works.
But that's one of the things that's different about this book. I've combed over the codex here, and I don't see an entry for Rough Riders.
They're gone. They're dead. They've been murdered.
They have ridden off into the sunset.
I'm hopeful of anything that anyone misses. I am hopeful.
Solid pun, Morgan. You jerk.
I'm hopeful of White Dwarf supplements. Done. I'm hopeful for articles on the community page. I'm hopeful for all that kind of stuff.
I'm hopeful for a meteor to crash through my roof and murder me right now. That's what I'm hopeful for. Very unhappy.
Oh man, but there's lots of good in this book, and I know, knowing some of your play styles, that you're going to appreciate a lot of things that are here.
Yeah, overall, obviously the book is cool, and I'm very excited. And it's Guard, and I've been a Guard player and been painstakingly building Vestroyans for 3 years now, and I love my Guard army. I am profoundly, truly, and
even on horses,
emotionally. Profoundly upset.
I think that's fair. It's fair.
I feel like this is the closest I've ever felt to the squat players, I guess. I don't know if there's ever been a whole Vect model range.
Yes, I was about to say Absolute and Vect and some Dark Eldar stuff that's we're currently still missing. The Regimental Orders, there are now specific orders, one for each of the regiments, that you can issue. So there's Acadian, and it has in parentheses tank order, pound them to dust. For the duration of the phase, you can re-roll the dice when determining the number of attacks the ordered model can make with turret weapons that use a randomly determined number. In example, heavy 6. So they get to kind of borrow a little bit from the Catechin side of things for this order. Which specific faction? That is Acadian Regimental Order.
Gotcha.
For a tank. The Catechins have burned them out. You can reroll the dice when determining the number of attacks the order unit can make with flamers and heavy flamers until the end of the phase. In addition, units targeted by models from the ordered unit with these weapons do not gain any bonuses to their saving throws for being in cover this phase.
So that's old school ignore cover.
Yeah, kind of neat. Valhallan fire on my command. The order unit, and remember, these are orders that you put on a unit. This is not something that's always on. You have to enact. You have to fire these things off.
So just like any of the other normal orders.
Yeah.
So you basically have 7 orders.
Yes, 7 orders to choose from. Valhalla, the order unit can shoot at enemy units that are within 1 inch of a friendly unit until the end of the phase, but each time you roll a hit of a 1 for such an attack, resolve that attack against a friendly unit within 1 inch of the target unit instead. You may choose which friendly unit is hit. This order may not be issued to a unit which is within 1 inch of an enemy unit.
Wait, what?
Yeah. The order unit can shoot at enemy units that are within 1 inch of a friendly unit. So you basically you're calling someone to fire onto into a close combat. You're ordering a unit that's outside of the combat to fire into the combat.
I feel like this one's decent, right? Like if Unit A gets assaulted by Magnus and then is locked into combat, I can now order Unit B to shoot in Magnus even though he's still locked in combat.
Magnus, since he's a flyer and a psyker, might not be the best example, but there are some things that applies to, for sure.
Where I see that being useful, like Andrew's saying though, is like, you wrap something up and you don't want to back out of it so you can shoot it, and then like a tank, you hit a land raider because you don't want its las cannons, shooting you. So now you don't have to back out so you can shoot the land raider. You stay locked in, and then you have your heavy weapons team still light it up with las cannons even though it's locked in. And
I think I have still failed to understand this order. That sounds better.
What you do, you're giving an order to a unit to fire at a unit that is an enemy that is within 1 inch of a friendly unit.
Basically, a unit that's locked in combat, you can still shoot at it.
Wait a minute. A friendly or a friendly regiment unit?
So...
No, yeah. But the order itself, you get to shoot at an enemy unit in combat. An enemy unit in combat with anybody?
The ordered unit can shoot at enemy units that are within 1 inch of friendly units until the end of the phase. But each time you roll a 1, it resolves against the friendly unit. You may choose which friendly unit is hit. The order may not be issued to a unit which is within 1 inch of an enemy unit.
So you can't shoot if you're locked in, but you can shoot at enemies if they're locked in with friendly units. If you roll a 1, you're hitting your friendly unit instead of the enemy.
That's right.
That has some crazy combo potential with other factions that just kind of hit me. Anyway, I like it now. Now, upon review, I like it.
Rastroyan.
You're saying you rolled a 1.
Until the end of the phase, the ordered unit can fire any of its weapons while it's within 1 inch of the enemy, regardless of the weapon types. If they do so, they must target enemy units within 1 inch, even if friendly units are within 1 inch of these units. So even if you got this mass melee or whatever and everybody's locked in, you can still fire at enemy units with any weapons, regardless of the weapon type. Armageddon. This order is called Mount Up. Until the end of the phase, the ordered unit can shoot and then immediately embark within a friendly Armageddon transport vehicle, as long as all models in the unit are within 3 inches of the vehicle. This order may not be issued to a unit which disembarked in the preceding movement phase.
Are you sure this isn't called Neener?
It is that, but yeah, that's not a bad order.
It's situationally good, right? I mean, there's times and places where that's going to be really handy, and you're like, whoop! I just get to jump back in the Chimera that dropped that, That
or one of those Bane Blades or something that has the
cargo capacity. Sure.
Yeah. Tallarins, a tank order. The ordered model can move up to 6 inches in this phase, either before or after it shoots, as if it were the movement phase. This does not affect how far the vehicle has moved for the purposes of determining how many times it can fire its turret weapon, as described in the Grinding Advance ability, which we'll talk about in just a second.
That's pretty good. So only certain factions. So, for example, Tallarn, they don't have a infantry order. They just have a bonus tank order.
It's just a bonus tank order, yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Militarum Tempestus, elimination protocol sanctioned. You can reroll failed wound rolls for all models from the ordered unit when attacking an enemy vehicle or monster this phase.
Whoa.
That's good.
That's a big deal for them.
Yeah, especially a lot of drop in special weapons.
Well, yeah, I mean, but just think about their little las gun is AP -3, right?
Oh, the hot shot las gun?
Yeah, the hot shot las gun with rerolling wounds. That's like crazy math.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, you may reroll failed wound rolls from the ordered unit when attacking any enemy vehicle or monsters this phase. Then the last but not least out of this regimental order section is the Mordian Form Firing Squad. I asked on Twitter today who bought all the Mordian plasma guns. Until the end of the phase, the ordered unit can target characters with their rapid fire weapons, even if they are not the closest enemy unit.
Yeah, that's fun.
I mean, potentially, now you've got to put your guardsmen pretty close to things, within assault range, I think, of most things. So you've got to make sure you want to get it done. You have to make sure you have the firepower to do what you want them to do, and it's worth the sacrifice.
Yeah, but I mean, in many cases, especially with Age of Death Blossom, being able to take that linchpin character out of commission is a huge advantage.
Yeah, you're playing somebody that's got aggressive conscripts, and they got that commissar just kind of sneaking up from the back. Yeah, you'll get them. I
see that one being useful a lot because, I mean, most of the time, when you're going to want to kill that character, typically that character's coming at you anyway. And, I mean, eventually it's going to get there, and then you're just going to open up on it. So I like that one a lot, just because I feel like you're going to get use out of that one every game.
I have mixed feelings about that. I hear what you're saying, Ricky. I don't know if that I'm as convinced as you are that that the characters you want to kill are the ones that are coming at you. You just off the top of my head, I think Changelings. I think Rowboat, Gilligan. I think that company commanders in other IG armies, the Malefic Lords in Demon and Chaos armies.
Well,
Abaddon.
the power
Those guys aren't
Malefic
coming
Lord
at me.
is an 18-inch smite, and that's
No.
a lot of these characters. Their power is an 18-inch smite. So
be sure.
there is like some of those things are going to be coming, trying to get close.
No, there's no doubt about that. But I
They
just
may kill your toughest 3 guardsmen before you fire. That's my point. Is you've just got to make sure you have enough firepower and it's worth the sacrifice.
to me, this is the power here is that I can now levy my veteran squad's las cannon against the Changeling or against Rowboat.
It's only
or
rapid fire weapons.
Oh, it's only rapid fire weapons.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The grinding advance rule. This is a neat rule. This has been on the community site too. The Lehman Russ tank's sturdy frame allows it to keep up a fearsome rate of fire even if it advances on the foe. If the model moves under half speed in its movement phase, i.e. moves a distance in inches less than half its current movement characteristic, it can shoot its turret weapon twice in the following shooting phase. The turret weapon must target the same unit both times. Furthermore, hit rolls for this model's turret weapon do not suffer the penalty for moving and shooting a heavy weapon. The following weapons are turret weapons. And so I like that it spells this out. Battle Cannon, Eradicator Nova Cannon, Exterminator Autocannon, Vanquisher Battle Cannon, Demolisher Cannon, Executioner Plasma Cannon, and Punisher Gatling Cannon.
Anything on top of the tank.
Like, I love that rule.
But it's not like a heavy stubber. I think that's what.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so
The big
ahead.
gun on top.
I think the important development here is that for the first time, at least in my time ever playing 40k, this is the first time I've ever said with a clean conscience that a Lehman Russ battle tank is a quality, valuable, competitive unit choice. It's always been the coolest and the most iconic and the biggest and awesomest, but for the first time ever, it's actually a legitimate competitive choice. We ran the numbers today based on the points values, and if you slap a Punisher. Punisher Gatling Cannon on top of a Lehman Russ with 3 heavy bolters, take the sponsons and the hull mount with heavy bolters, you're going to put out 49 strength 5 shots a turn. That's a tremendous amount. And given the way the orders work, you can reroll ones to hit. If you're Talon, you can ignore the penalties to moving and shooting. If you're Vestroyan, you're shooting those things at 30 to 42 inches. Tons of options and competitive playability there that has never existed for Lehmans before. And that's really cool to me that for the first time ever, Lehmans are a good competitive option.
They're really pushing them and a good point value too. These things they weren't very expensive in the index, and they're not incredibly expensive now in the codex, and we'll talk about the points in just a little bit, but extra rules on top of that value points. I mean, that's strong. That's real strong.
I called my 8-year-old son before we recorded, and he has just 9 Lehman Russes. That's his entire army. And I explained to him how his army just become like the single greatest thing ever.
Oh, just
40K.
wait.
He's
Ricky.
super pumped, yeah.
Creed, good character. He has the Cadia regiment, obviously. He's a tactical genius. If your army is battle-forged, you receive an additional 2 command points if Creed is your warlord. His voice of command is 12 inches, and he may use this ability 3 times during your turn.
I am amazed. Can I just point out here that I am amazed that he is even in this book? Because, looking from a narrative standpoint, he got locked in a Tesseract box 100 years ago when Cadia fell. How is he here?
Yeah, the combats within 40k can happen during any time period it's your narrative to forge, Mr. Morgan.
Yes, I realize this.
For the interest of time, let me just keep going. The company commanders, senior officer, also have voice of command. They can use that twice per turn. So I think that's what they have in the index right now.
Yeah, that's not a change in the index.
Yeah. Tank commander and knight commander Pask, they both have 3 orders: the full throttle, gunner's kill on sight, and strike and shroud. It's, their HQ choices still. I think it's neat that you can put together armored companies without really compromising much, especially with the way that the detachments are now, where they've all got those HQ choices where it might have been hard to put a tank in there just out of codexes without these types of options. Command Pask is Cadia. Commissar Yarg, this is the guy I wanted to talk about. We're going to get to this point, but there's a whole list of the subsections of the Imperial Guard that taking them will not violate your detachment's ability to be a certain regiment. So, like, we're Imperial Soup, if you take, you take something that's a Space Marine, an Inquisitor, and a whatever, you're not a Space Marine detachment. These subsects of the Imperial Guard do not violate that. So you could take, like, for instance, Yarick is from the Officio Perfectus. You can take units from that and the Psyker Division and the stuff the Ratlings come from or whatever, and it won't violate your regiment detachment.
Does Yarick still give, like, the area buff that he did in the Index?
You're talking about the Hero of Hades Hive. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 made for friendly Astra Militarum units within 6 inches of Commissar Yarg.
Yes.
And then reroll all hits for if you're fighting orcs.
Yeah.
Yes. He has that.
So he does that, and now he can be taken by any faction,
yes.
any regiment.
Yes.
That's pretty cool, pretty awesome. Very powerful from a gameplay system, but to give that bubble of reroll ones is very, very good. To be sure.
And for the points that he is, let me just go ahead and pull up what his points are. Commissar Yarick, his points, he's 130 points.
Well, and he's a pretty tough guy, because he's coming back on a 3+ if he loses his last wound. He's got a 4-up invulnerable save now instead of the Garrett. He doesn't mess around. All we need to do is just find that Ogren launcher again.
Yeah.
So we can load him up on that.
Speaking of being still just a bad mamma jamma, if Commissar Yark is your warlord, he must have the Master of Command warlord trait. And what this does is your warlord gains the Voice of Command ability. If your warlord already has the Voice of Command or tank order ability, they may instead issue 1 additional order per turn. So he's going to get to issue orders like he did in the last edition.
That seems good.
It's bossing all the people around.
It's just going to be 1 order. Does Voice of Command just give you 1 order?
Yeah.
Okay.
Normal Voice of Command
Default,
is just 1 order.
Okay. It's better than none.
Yeah. He has the Aura of Discipline, so they use his leadership instead of their own. And he has the Summary Execution. Astra Militarum units within 6 inches of a friendly commissar never lose more than 1 model as a result of any single failed morale test. So that's the same. So again, in the interest of kind of time and telling you what you really want to know about, let's jump right to the conscripts.
I think that's the thing that everybody wants to know about.
There's another bad ripoff.
The conscripts have the regiment bonus. So, for instance, you can have Catechin conscripts. So they're going to be strength 4. And when we get to their regimental doctrines, their base stat is strength 3. The change here, the only change is that they are raw recruits. On a D6, roll a D6 each time an officer uses the Voice of Command ability to issue an order to this unit. On a 4+, the order applies as normal. Otherwise, the order has no effect and no other orders can be issued to this unit for the rest of the turn.
In my opinion, if you consider the fact that they're getting these free bonus rules from the regiments, that is not enough. They're actually better than they were before.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's no beating around that bush.
There's no beating around this bush. I mean, I think this is whether this is an oversight or an intentional choice by Games Workshop, I'm not really sure. I can't speak to that. But from a competitive player's perspective, there's going to be wailing and gnashing of teeth with regard to the conscript rules. I mean, this change doesn't address at all how they're powerful in their current battlefield role.
It doesn't address the math involved to remove them from the table.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the fact that they get the Catechin or Vostroyan or Cadian traits really in a lot of ways renders this kind of a moot point. You've basically said, all right, hey, 50% of the time you're not going to take orders. That's it, right?
Part of the big frustration was that you were able to fall back with them, which is still... Now, look, I think we're of the mind, you and I at least agree, Andrew. I don't know, I won't speak for everyone on the show right now, but I think that fallback is a little bit too powerful. And I would love to see a match play version to where you either have to burn command points or you get to do it some X number of times per phase. I'd like to see something like that in match play. I don't know where we'll get that, and maybe that's too much. That is one man's opinion. I just know that we share the opinion that fallback is a very powerful thing. But part of what you could do with fallback or conscripts was have them fall back, order them to get back in the fight, and so double the fun.
Yeah, but doing that netted you however many more rapid fire las rifle shots at BS3. BS4 plus, right? So
5 plus.
5 plus.
5 plus, excuse me. So that was the net of being able to do that was relatively minuscule, right? You're talking about maybe 2 or 3 wounds against Marine equivalent units. That's nothing. The real issue was the fact that I could take a blob of 40 of them and put a commissar behind them, and even if you killed 20, I still have an effective bubble screen because I'm only going to lose 1 to leadership. That was the problem, and it went totally unaddressed. And they doubled down on it by giving them the regiment traits, such that conscripts are more powerful than they ever were.
I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. Primaris Psychers, 28 points.
What?
What were they in this index?
40. They were 40 in the index.
Without
Are we not counting
that
weapons?
doesn't include their staff. They have to take what is that? The
force staff.
The force stave, yeah. So without war gear, what were they?
So I think that under the index, and we can rifle through this right now, but I think they were just 40 base, and then the weapon was free. They may have swapped that up.
The force stave is 12 points.
So so now they're 40 points, right? 28 plus 12.
Yeah, I think that's right. They still
that's better.
They get smite and 2 powers out of the Psychina discipline, which is now 6 powers. We'll talk about that.
Can they still cast only 1 power per turn?
Yeah, 1 power and deny 1.
Okay.
Yep, that is the same. Infantry squads, I believe, remain the same. The Master of Ordnance, this is important because that's a very popular choice. Without war gear is 30 points.
That's an 8-point reduction for anyone following along at home.
Yeah, the artillery barrage that he has to come with is 0 points still, as well as the last pistol. But he keeps that 100-inch range heavy D6 Master of Ordnance artillery barrage. He has a regiment, so he has the regiment keyword, so you can add things to him still. I don't know the things that are going to apply to him specifically for this, but I'm just letting you know that's something to build into a strategy. The Saiyans are in here. The Saiyans are neat because, as we discussed, they're going to get their own regimental doctrine, and they have their own special rules and own orders you can get attached to them. But they're one of these units that you can include in your Imperial Guard regiment of another type detachment. And they don't violate those regiment rules. They will not get their own regiment rules in that case, but they at least don't take them away from your other IG regiment.
Do they fall under that regiment?
They do not. They do not get the regiment rule.
Don't take that keyword.
Yeah.
So it's like a little exception to the keyword stuff. They're only limiting themselves, but based on their own regimental benefit, I'm not entirely sure how much of a detriment that is for them.
Well, if they don't get any regiment abilities, and you're taking them for different reasons, you're taking them for their firepower, which is cool, but you're at least getting to use them if you thought the models were neat, and they are, and their abilities are neat. They're just not getting that extra regimental bump.
Gotcha.
Special
I like
weapons.
it. It's a buff for if you want to play pure Tempestus Scions, you get that buff.
Yeah,
so I like that.
Or you want that deep strike
Or
ability.
you put them in their own detachment, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can put them on. Yeah, for sure. You can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I think in most of the time people are going to end up doing anyways, because it's easy to just make a Scion detachment just by itself. So I'm not sure how often that's going to come up, but at least there are certain environments that you play in that are looking to limit the number of detachments you can take further than what it says in the match play rules.
Or you're trying to make
everybody's got their own style.
Trying to make a brigade or something like that,
Yeah, something like that.
Well, and remember, a core thing in the game is there's no more, I just put my stuff in reserve. You have to have a rule that lets you get in there, and the aerial drop is still, I think it's valid. Where I was going to go with special weapons, though. Special weapon squads are 4 points apiece per model, minimum of 6 models in the unit. Is that the same in the index? I believe that is.
Yes.
Get into it.
4 points a model?
Yes.
The heavy weapon squad, I believe this changed. They are 6 points per model.
Yeah, there are 4 in the index.
So the special weapon squads have become much more alluring in light of the change to the plasma points, because the special weapon squads are still hitting on 4s.
We haven't gotten there yet, but I'll talk about that right now since you brought it up. In the ranged weapon section, plasma guns, a model with a ballistic skill of 4+, the plasma gun is 7 points. For any other model, it's a 13-point upgrade.
That's a peculiar is the word I will say. I don't know if it's good, bad, indifferent. I don't know how it's going to affect balanced play, but it basically says if you are 17% better at shooting, you are 50% more expensive. Okay, like that just seems so random. It's kind of I don't really know what to make of it other than to say, it is what it is. But it does kind of, for me, for example, for my Imperial Guard list that I've been playing in 8th edition, I've been playing a lot of veterans, tons of vets. Lots
Saiyans also BS 3+, by the way. And before you get too far on that point, Horton, the Hotshot las gun is now neg 2 AP. I don't know if it was neg 3 in the index, but it's neg 2.
Oh, maybe it was neg 2. We're just thinking about old AP 3.
Just have it in my face right now, so I figured I'd let you know. Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Well, no, I think the point is well made, and is that whether you have been spamming Scions or going with Scions in addition to your gunline guard, or whether you're spamming vets, kind of the way I have been, the change has been made. Like, hey, you're going to be paying double for plasma. I haven't run the math. I haven't sat down and tried to design a list about whether or not it's still cost effective to bring plasma guns, even at 13 points apiece. Hey, that's still better than the 2 points. That's still 2 points better than what they cost in 7th. But it seems to me now that comparatively, special weapons team, which I wasn't taking because they were only ballistic skill 4, that's a list designer's choice, where you're going to be like, well, yes, they're only hitting on 4s, but they are 7 points or 6 points per model cheaper because of the weapon, and then 2 points per model cheaper because of the veteran as opposed to a regular guy.
A veteran with a plasma gun is 19 points.
Yes.
A special weapon guy with a plasma gun is 11 points.
Right. And how many plasma guns can you take in a special weapon squad?
I believe it to be 3. 3 models must replace their las guns with an item from the special weapon list.
Unless Mordians, in which case all those guys are gone. You can't find any plasma gun guys from
right.
I mean, let's just a platoon commander. You can just pay 20 points, and he can just follow these guys in a Valkyrie. They all jump out, and then he just puts the order on them, and they're re-rolling to hit anyway, right? So doesn't that seem better points-wise?
I think more plasma guns, because sometimes you're just going to roll a lot of 4s, seems better than paying almost double for one.
No, that's what I'm saying. And then you just, if you just really have to hit, just take the commander to give the command to re-roll with the new regimental order.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the differences. And Andrew, your point, where you got was that plasma guns on models that hit more are becoming drastically more expensive.
Yeah. I mean, if just at the raw numbers, it's 17% more effective for 50% more, or 45% more expensive. There may be situations where that's worth the cost, but I think as a whole, spamming plasma scions or plasma veterans.
It's not 50%. It's 90% more expensive.
Oh, I'm saying it's a 50%.
Almost 100%.
You're doubling the cost, kind of depending on how you look at the percentages, but for minimal return on effectiveness. Again, that could be worth it depending on your list, but I think that the majority of competitive players, competitive builds, are going to look at this and be like, well, glad that's it. That's it for Scion spam. That's it for veteran spam with plasma, at least.
Yeah, you got to, again, it's kind of juice first, worth the squeeze type thing. Yeah.
We may be seeing a decline in the number of plasma guns that we're seeing, but how about things that those guys would ride in, like Taurox Prime, stuff like that? Because those are still some really powerful builds that focus a lot on bringing tons of those little tanks.
The Taurox is 40 points without the war gear. And the Taurox...
Go
ahead.
Yeah, that's 15 points cheaper
Then the
than
base
in
cost?
Insects. Yeah.
We'll check out the weapons here in just a bit and see if that ends up washing out in a different way or whatever. Priests are in here with the war hymns. You can add 1 to the attack characteristics of all models in the Adeptus Ministorum infantry and Adeptus Militarum infantry units that are within 6 inches of any friendly Ministorum priest. It's 1 extra attack. That ain't bad. You can re-roll failed hit rolls for this unit, and that's this unit. That's the priest itself. Yeah, he can re-roll hit rolls, and it's a 4+ vulnerable save.
Interesting.
Yep. Officer of the Fleet still in there. Ogren. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just the perception and stigma from editions past. I can't get excited about the Ogren, but
how many points per model?
They're 30 points apiece.
Now that hasn't changed.
And they need a launcher. They need a way to get them into combat. They don't get a regiment, so you can't do some of these orders and stuff to them. I don't know. I still think they're a little under the mark here. Not punching at their weight, both figuratively and literally.
Just throw them in a vendetta.
Well,
you put them. Yeah, you put 3 of them in a vendetta. No, use the vendetta.
It's like 900 points now, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's
that hits on 5s. Don't take this advice from Ricky, please.
Hey, I still like the vendetta. It's still good. It's not amazing.
That right there, dear listeners, was where if you're having a conversation about, I need to buy a new car, and one of your friends is like, well, just buy a Porsche, and you're like, well, I don't actually think that's an effective way to get my kids to soccer practice. Well, no, there's a Porsche with 4 doors. You can get that one. No, that's not a good option. Please disregard.
That was a great Ricky impression, though.
First off, no. Secondly, you can. The vendetta is still useful. It is still a useful vehicle.
It hits on 5s, dude.
Not if it's hovering.
Then it's dead.
You're a sweet boy. I just want to tousle your hair.
Rattlings, I believe, are the exact same. The rattling point cost is 5 points per model. They have to find the best spot, deploy 18 inches from any enemy models, anywhere on the board 18 inches from enemy models, shoot sharp and scarper. Immediately after making a shooting attack, this unit can move as if it were the movement phase, though it cannot advance as part of the move. But I think you advance in the movement phase.
Yeah, you advance in the movement phase.
Yep, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Models receive +2 bonus to a saving throw when they receive the benefits of cover instead of only a +1. So their save is 6+, so +2. Taking them down to a 4. And they're good. I like rattlings. I don't think they changed.
Yeah, they're exactly the same.
Sentinels are the exact same. Heavy weapon squads, I think we already said that they went up a couple of points, right? They're 6 points a model. Is that correct? They did go up in points?
Yeah, they went from 4 points to 6 points. This was a big concern for a lot of kind of competitive players who are looking to kind of keep track of the changes to the Guard book. A big concern was the heavy weapons team, specifically the mortar squads, which were getting spammed pretty widespread across the top competitive GT winning lists and whatnot. They have gone from 4 points to 6 points, so a 33% increase. A big points cost percentage wise, but substantively, if you're looking at a mortar squad, it was 27 points and now it's 33. I'm still taking those squads at 33 points a pop, and I think a lot of other competitive players are. So
the mortar itself is still 5 points.
Correct, and so you're looking at 18 points for 3 teams plus 15 points for the squad, or for the weapons. So all in all, a step in the right direction. Was it enough? I don't know. Jury's out. Too soon to tell. Whether or not it was substantively or to correct or to change the competitive meta. Given it being as how a ton of other points reductions were made across the Guard Codex, for example, if you're taking 2 Masters of Ordnance, well, now you were paying 38 points a piece for those models. Now you're paying 30 points. So if you were taking 2 of those previously, though that point reduction makes up for the point increase in your heavy weapons teams. So I think it's a net gain of 0. We basically are looking at the same thing for most of the competitive IG lists. But it's interesting that they did address that problem but not some of the others that had been raised.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes to show you that they will adjust points where they think is necessary, and that they could change one page in this codex and make it happen and not have to re-release a whole new codex, which is cool in the future. So Basilisks is still 100 points.
Yep.
Heavy Bolter 8 points. Basilisks get the Regiment Keyword. All the tanks and stuff that we're going to talk about have the Regiment Keyword, so things will apply to them, automatically making them a little bit better.
Isn't that just funny how like a giant square or cube of metal is more regimenty than an Ogryn?
The people inside, still the people inside.
Ogryns are people too,
I guess.
Sort of.
Wyverns 85 points. I think that's the same, and this is without the heavy bolter and stuff on there.
That's right.
Yeah, Hydras. Hard for me to get excited about them with all this other cool stuff in the book. But they all get the regiment stuff. So, again, maybe there's some things that we're not missing. Manticore. I know you all want to hear about the Manticore. Manticore's base cost is 125 points. I believe that to be the same. Yeah. Plus the heavy bolter. So it's a steel. It also has the regiment stuff. So this is where things like the Catechin Doctrine really pays off, because you're only rolling 2d6 for the Storm Eagle rocket, and you only get to reroll one of the dice. And I don't know, it just seems real good.
Yeah, I for one was really excited as a Vestroyan player to see my Manticores go from 120-inch range to 126-inch range. I think that's really going to be a game-changing feature in a lot of my competitive matches.
A 42-inch heavy bolter.
Dude, the joke landed. It's fine. I get it. Some of these... It's
a 206-inch Death Strike missile.
200, exactly. Or my favorite, the 246-inch Earthshaker cannon, just in case I'm taking those basilisks. But ultimately, it is interesting to see, and this is going to be part of the list designer's paradise, where you're like, hey... This regiment is better at doing X, while this regiment is better doing Y. And what I love about this codex is that it gives the list designer to really cater to his play type while still playing Imperial Guard. You can still push regular humans around the table with plenty of tanks, have cool orders and all that stuff, and then you have whatever model aesthetic you really want with those rules. And I think I'm very excited about it. There are plenty of things to, there's a lot of stuff about this codex that I'm kind of surprised by, genuinely surprised by. But overall, Guard just got more powerful, and that's pretty cool.
Across the board. Yeah. I think that the big super heavies and stuff remained at least the same enough, similar enough to where I did not notice any differences from them. The Leman Russ, on the other hand, though, let's talk about the Leman Russ for a second. The base Leman Russ chassis is 122 points.
And they were 132 in the index. So you've basically across the board reduced the Leman Russ chassis by 10 points. So you've given it the grinding advance rule, and we've reduced cost, given it a new rule, and given it access to regimental traits, which we were talking about this in the pre-show. I'm very excited. I'm most excited in the whole codex. The thing I'm most excited about is the change to the Leman Russes. For the first time in my entire life playing 40k, in the 6 years that I've been playing this game, Leman Russes are a legitimate competitive option. If you want to build a tournament 40k list for the very first time in my life, in my time playing this game, you can be like, hey, I'm going to bring Lehmans, and that's not a bad choice. Case in point, the Punisher, Games Workshop themselves highlighted this option. They were like, look, you put grinding advance on a Punisher, and that thing is now putting out 40 strength 4 shots a turn if it moves under less than half its speed. You couple that with heavy bolter options, and then the tank orders rerolling 1s, or a tank commander who's hitting on 3s, Pask who's hitting on 2s, and suddenly you're putting out almost 50 strength 5 shots a turn, with plus whatever the regimental trait is. So for Paul's beloved, I guess is the Catechins or the Mordians that are rerolling 1? No, the Cadians, excuse me. Those guys are just innately rerolling 1s. They don't even need the order. For my Vestroyans, those Punishers are now reaching out to 30 inches. That's a big deal. And so I'm most excited about that change, and that the Lehmans are a good competitive choice.
Now, let me ask you this, Andrew. Do you feel like the changes?
Chris, real quick before you ask this question, if it has anything to do with Rough Riders, I will never talk to you again.
No.
With that said, please continue.
I can respect that. My question is the change to Lehman Russ tanks good enough to offset the change and make the tanks more appealing than, say, a giant blob of conscripts that is now the same points but also better?
Yeah, so I definitely think so. Reason being, you've basically, at least in my kind of cold estimate of, and I haven't designed a list, but for less than 175 points, I think the cold read is like 166 or 165, whatever it is. I can take a basic Lehman Russ tank that's 12 wounds at toughness 8, and put out 50 strength 5 shots a turn. That's a tremendous amount of anti-infantry shooting. And to be fair, those two things, the Lehman Russ tank and the conscripts, fulfill very different battlefield roles. So to compare them one versus the other is tough, right? If you're a guard player, take both. But in terms of efficacy, conscripts, have basically are the same. They do the exact same thing they did in the index. They stand between your opponent and your valuable stuff, and they stop him from shooting it or assaulting it. That's what conscripts do. They do that equally effectively, and nothing has changed for them of note. The Lehmans,
they don't kill anything.
They don't really kill anything. I mean, they even with the Catechin or the Mordian traits or the Vestroians, where now I have a 30
You're creating
range.
a mathematical problem for your opponent. I mean, that's really what it is. But they also come equipped with the ability to win the game through objective secured. I mean, that's
certainly, as troop choices, they're great, but that's never really been the issue for Guard. I just want to kind of put a bow on my response to Chris. I think your point is well made, but I think that the answer is, in terms of efficacy, the Lehman Russ went from a cool, fluffy, archaic kind of this. He went from the old, respectable guy in the corner of the room that everyone likes to being, oh my goodness, this dude can absolutely crush stuff. And then that's what happens when you say, hey, all those guns, remember those guns? You can now shoot them twice, and you're 10 points cheaper. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal.
We haven't covered everything, obviously, on the just the unit side, but let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about some of the core of the Bulwarker humanity here with the Regimental Doctrines, some of the stratagems, and just some other cool stuff. And I think you're going to like what we say about Lehman's.
Is your garage full of dusty old models? Head on over to Frontline Gaming's secondhand shop. We buy, sell, and trade used Warhammer miniatures daily. Head on over to frontlinegaming.org for more details.
Hey everybody, we are back. I still got Andrew Whitaker and Ricky Addington.
Index Rough Riders till I die.
R.I.P.
Chris Morgan.
Burr, burr, burr.
Hey Chris, you're at Battlehaven right now. We talked to them a couple of weeks ago. This is a gaming resort. You were there hanging out. This thing starts on what? It started on Tuesday.
Yeah, it started Tuesday morning at 10, and they started the party off right quick. I mean, there's been a whole slew of activities to do right from the get-go. We've got somewhere around like the 12 gaming tables full of really nice terrain for whatever system you feel like playing on. A bunch of people ready to do demos for several game systems. There's been airbrush classes from some very very skilled commissioned painters that have come up to do stuff. There's so much to do that the day's just flown by, and I just have got to give a shout out to Sarah and the Battlehaven crew for just delivering such an amazing experience. Like they've been treating me so well and treating all the guests here so well. You feel like you're at kind of like a family reunion. It's like a cruise on land. It's wonderful.
That's awesome, man. I want to jump back into talking about the Astra Militarum and some of the new things. By the time you read this or hear this, you might have seen all the regimental doctrines on the Warhammer community site, but this is stuff that will certainly be in the codex when you get it. It goes up for pre-order when you hear this now. Every single one of the codexes so far has had a way to make your troops objective secured, and this is no different. In a battle-forged army, all troop units in Astra Militarum detachments and all Leman Rust units in Spearhead detachments gain this ability. Such a unit that is within range of an objective marker controls the objective marker even if there are more enemy models within range of it.
Have they ironed out how like 2 OBSEC units combat over an objective?
Yeah. If you're both OBSEC, and that's what it goes on to say at the next sentence is if you're both OBSEC, then the most models apply.
Gotcha. So that's pretty huge. Again, another thing that makes Lehman's awesome. If you take them in the Spearhead, that's a great option.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So the Regimental Doctrines. If your army is battle-forged, all regiment units in Astra Militarum detachment in an Astra Militarum detachment gain the Regimental Doctrine. So then it goes on to tell you that the Militarum Tempestus can be included in your Astra Militarum detachment without preventing other units in the detachment from gaining a Regimental Doctrine. But the Militarum Tempestus lose their special doctrine. And then it goes on to describe the advisors and auxilia. And this is what the tech priests, the servitors, the commissars we were talking about, the psychers, primary psychers, and anything from the Psychona division, those don't screw up being able to take your regiment, including them in other detachments, in your AM detachment.
Anytime you hear Regimental Doctrine, you're just hearing chapter tactics.
Now, a unit listed below can be included in an AM detachment without preventing other units in that detachment from gaining a Regimental Doctrine. Note, however, that the units listed below can never themselves benefit from the doctrine. So that is important. Just because you're including them in a Catechin detachment, they don't gain any of the Catechin abilities, even though they don't prevent you from also gaining the Catechin doctrines on the regiments that have it.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't remember if I didn't hear it or not, whether or not you said it. But Aeronautica Imperialis, are they lumped into that as well? Can they be taken?
Aeronautica Imperialis units are included.
And the reason I asked was the Vulture gunship is Aeronautica Imperialis, and I still think the Twin Punisher Vulture is hands down one of the best vehicles in the Astra Militarum. So I don't want to get hosed out of using that.
Doesn't sound like it. I think you can still do that. Without cause for worry. So the Regimental Doctrines are next. Cadian. Born soldiers reroll hit rolls of 1 in the shooting phase for units with this doctrine if they did not move in the previous movement phase. If an infantry unit with this doctrine is issued the take aim order and it did not move in the previous movement phase, reroll all failed hit rolls.
That is very, very, very strong. Make no mistake about that. Competitively super powerful. I do think, however, that it's not and we'll get through this. I mean, you've already heard or have read a number of the regimental options. I think the Cadians are the strongest, but they're not a no-brainer choice. This is good, not great. It only benefits models that didn't move or units that didn't move. That means that if you want to take advantage of your regimental trait, you're stationary. Compare that to the Catechins, the Mordians, the Vestroyans, who are getting their bonus whether they moved or not. I think a lot of guard armies are one of the biggest weaknesses they have is that they're static. They're not moving, and the Cadians just kind of double down on that and say, hey, if we want to get our bonus, we can't move on top of the incentive we already have or our inability to move. The counterpoint to that, and I'll wrap up with this, is that everything that all the other guard armies need orders for, the Cadians get innately, right? And so, the mortar squads that we were talking about earlier, the veteran squads with their ballistic skill on a 3+, all of those guys just innately, they don't need company commanders to give them orders. They're just re-rolling ones. That's hugely important. That's the math hammer on that is a +8% increase in effectiveness for a ballistic skill 4+ unit. That's a big deal. And then on top of that, you're taking the company commanders anyway that you would already have taken in those old lists that are now giving you reroll to hit on everything. That's monstrous. That's really, really powerful.
It can be. You could have some really strong turns. No lie. Catechins are next. Infantry units with this. You've seen this on the community page. With a doctrine, add 1 to their strength characteristic. In addition, they can add 1 to their leadership characteristics if they are within 6 inches of a friendly Catechin officer. Each time a vehicle with this doctrine fires a ranged weapon, that makes a random number of attacks, i.e. heavy D6 or 2D6, you can reroll one of the dice used to determine the number of attacks. That's very important. Reroll one of the dice. So if it's like a Wyvern that rolls 4D6 or the Manticore that rolls 2D6, you can only reroll one of those dice.
Yeah, this
is amazing.
This is the breadwinner. This is my gold medalist in terms of regimental powers, or traits rather. It's certainly on the medal stand whether you put it silver or gold, but the ability to say to a Manticore that you're essentially, rolling 2d6, oh, got a 1, and then revariabling that. The math is incalculable. It will win you games, especially with the sheer volume of units that have variable hits. I think the biggest one for me when I read this was like, oh my goodness, I've been a huge fan since 8th edition of the Leman Russ tanks taking plasma executioners. Well, lo and behold, looky here, Catechins with a Leman Russ with a plasma executioner. I get to shoot that thing twice, and I get to re-roll my D6 roll, which means if I'm shooting it twice, historically, that's 2d6. Now I've got an average of 7 shots. But with this Catechin special rule, Paul and I ran the numbers in this book when we first had the book in our hands. It's something like an average of 9 or 10 shots. My goodness, like that, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to think to themselves, I went from an average of 3.5 to an average of 9.5 overnight.
It does take a rocket scientist to make the Manticore, but
well, I guess you're not wrong.
Well, and to another point is that this is something I was already burning the majority of my command points on, is rerolling one of these results on a Manticore or a Basilisk or whatever.
Yeah, it was mandatory. It didn't matter what happened. You save one each turn for the Manticore.
And one of those regiments or one of those armies that like you can have command points coming out your ears.
Yeah, you build a brigade. But that's what I did. That's my strategy with the Guard, is to build the brigade, and then I'm burning my command points primarily on rerolls of some kind, and a large percentage of those are rerolling the results of those shots. And so having that built into my regiment, and it just makes me feel good inside. And I've always said, you've always heard on this show that they are better in close combat than the other regiments, and now they are 100% better than all the other regiments.
Well, they work out, and finally they're being rewarded for that. It's being recognized that they got the biggest guns in 40k.
Oh, I love it. I
just kind of feel like they all turned into Brock Sampson from the Venture Bros.
Well, the Regimental Standard put out an article today about Catechin slang or whatever.
Yes, I didn't even get to read.
It's worth checking out.
I'll check that out.
The Valhallan Grim Demeanor. Infantry units with this doctrine have the number of models that flee, rounding up if they fail a morale test. Vehicles with this doctrine have a damage table, double the number of wounds they have remaining for the purposes of determining what their characteristics are. So as you beat down a vehicle, when you're determining what its stats, like its BS and movement is, you double that to determine what it is. And you're not giving it extra wounds. It just thrives longer.
This is one of those low-key, low-key, this could be super, super strong. Especially on the super heavy tanks, the Baneblade, the Stormhammers, etc. Because those things degrade in a really substantive way. It's also, it strikes me as if you're list designing for a Leman Russ, kind of an armored company style list where you're going to take a bunch of Lemans or a bunch of tanks generally. You really have to weigh your offensive versus defensive capabilities. With this particular regimental trait, you're looking at saying, well, the more damage I take, I degrade much less significantly. Conversely, I don't do as much damage if I'm taking Catechins or Vestroians or Cadians.
Well, maybe, because you could just roll the 6, and then it doesn't matter. And you're not re-rolling a 4 either.
Well, and right, that's exactly right. Which is why for Catechins, yeah, that's a big deal. Cadians, again, re-rolling ones. Well, what if I don't roll any ones? That makes a difference. Or
I'm just saying,
Vestroyans,
over the long haul, you're exactly right. But I'm saying in a game, or if you're used to playing an opponent that you grind it out to the last, like on Wednesday nights or whatever, if I'm playing my buddy and we're always in the game with us both having 2 models left on the table, if your models are always more effective, you're going to get the advantage there.
Yeah, just to kind of drive home Andrew's point there, though, let's say you've got any of the Baneblade variants, their damage track is the same. So you would have to be down to 6 wounds remaining on a Storm Sword before you were degraded, because their damage track they don't degrade until 13 wounds.
And they start out at 24, right? Or is it
26?
26, okay.
That's a huge, like, I mean, if that's your list design, Ricky, absolutely, like, cataclysmic. You basically went from saying, all right, I need to do, 14 wounds, or whatever the math is, I'm not sure. Now I have to do 20 in order to degrade him just so he's hitting on 5s. It basically ensures that your tanks are going to be operating at top efficiency for the entire time that you're driving them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And try and think of like all of the times that you have almost killed that super big nasty thing, and you felt, phew, well, at least it's not hitting me as well. Like now that good feeling's gone.
I mean, it is so true. I think that this is very much, if you're gonna play tanks, this is the regiment to do it. And I'll just anecdotally, since I've been playing, I mean, I've recently acquired 5 Lehman Russ tanks, and I was like, I've been playing Lehman Russes a lot recently, and I have loved it. It is so fun to drive the tanks around and make vroom vroom noises, and it's a blast. But every game, without fail, every single game, my opponents and I are literally just looking at it and saying, all right, I don't need to kill that tank, that Lehman. I need to just degrade it 1 level such that he's now hitting on 5s. Or if I can get him into that next level where he's hitting on 6s. At that point, you've functionally eliminated that tank from really hurting me, from really hurting the opponent. Man, if I have this regiment, lights out, man. You're not gonna you now need to do 10 wounds.
And you got them in a spearhead, so they're now OBSEC Lemons.
Exactly. So you got to kill them till they're dead for them to be not effective, and that's powerful, man. That's awesome.
So this next one's good. The Vostroyan heirloom weapons. Now, you may have seen this on the community site. Units with this doctrine add 6 inches to the maximum range of heavy or rapid fire weapons they fire, which would normally have a range of 24 or more. So it's not for every weapon, but for heavy and rapid fire weapons with a range of 24 or more, you add 6 to the range.
So the Vostroyan fire warriors are going to be doing some work up there on the front lines.
We kind of talked about it briefly in the last segment, but extra range on heavy bolters, extra range on the Punisher cannons.
That can make all the difference sometimes.
So this is having read the book and having talked to the guys about this and kind of understanding it. These guys are kind of they're the bronze medalists in my book, maybe a little off the medal stand in terms of power ranking. They plus 6 inches. You just don't realize how important that is until you are in that situation. You're like, oh my goodness, this unit now has purpose. Because of that range modifier. The big thing for me is the rapid fire bonus. Plasma weapons, las rifles, etc. are now double tapping at 15 inches as opposed to 12. That is situationally incredible. And then those dreaded mortar teams that kind of have been consistently rearing their ugly head as we analyze the effectiveness of all of these traits. Now those are 54-inch range mortars, and I don't have to see you. There's really no hiding from las cannons or mortars that have 54-inch ranges. So is it good? Is it as good as re-rolling your variable hits? I don't know if it's that strong. I don't know if it's catechin strong. I don't know if it's as strong as keeping your Lehman Russes effective and powerful for the entire game. But I know for sure that plus 6 inch range, making your plasma guns 30-inch ranges, giving them an effective strike range of 36 inches, I know for a fact that is going to be in play every single game, and every single opponent's going to have to account for it. So,
and don't forget, I mean, even your conscripts are benefiting from that, because the last gun is rapid fire. So conscripts are now shooting out the 30-inch range. So, now even those Tau that are going to sit 30 inches back and try to start popping through your infantry, you're going to be shooting back at them.
Yeah, and the heavy bolter is the big winner, because now, man, 42-inch range.
42-inch range on heavy, yeah.
That's
absolutely.
That'll
It's annoying. It's very annoying.
It's super annoying.
Being an 8-point weapon now. It's an 8-point weapon.
Yeah, with a 42-inch range. Yeah, exactly. So, all in all, I'm a big fan of this. Is what happened as a guy who has an army with this particular special rule. I cannot complain.
So the Armageddon industrial efficiency. Infantry units with this doctrine may double the number of attacks they make with rapid-fire weapons at a range of up to 18 inches, rather than half the weapon's range as normal. Vehicles with this doctrine treat attacks against them with an AP of -1 as having AP 0. So this rules back. I think our feelings on that are documented. Maybe it's better on a tank. I don't know that it is, but the extra rapid fire range I think is important, or at least could be good.
So this one was to me, it strikes me as the poor man's Vostroyans, right? Where you're saying, all right, well, I have rapid fire at 18 inches, but I didn't get a range bonus across the board. So whereas the Vostroyans went from a 12-inch rapid fire to a 15-inch rapid fire, these guys went to an 18-inch rapid fire. Okay, that's good.
This is the Steel Legion, by the way. I don't know if I made that very clear, but it's the Armageddon
Steel Legion, right?
Legion, yeah.
So I think that that's a threshold matter, that it's not as good as the Vost. But more to the point, to kind of compound what Paul said, we've already made our sentiments clear about the negating of the -1 modifier. If this was across the board, all APs affect me as one less than they otherwise would, that is so strong. But what this is basically saying is that if you shoot me with a heavy bolter and autocannon, I ignore that -1 AP. But if you shoot me with a las cannon, I'm still a -3. You shoot with a Manticore, I'm still a -2, so on and so forth. And I think that has a lot less utility. So I would welcome being proven wrong on this one. And obviously these models look incredible. So if you want to play the Armageddon Steel Legion, I support you. Like Paul said, I think we're...
Yeah, it's not my favorite, but it's still...
It's not my favorite.
When you add in everything, and there's the fact that Guard are powerful anyway, maybe you don't need some of these buffs. Who knows? And so you can make a case for almost anything. And the time when that -1 really matters, and you win the game because of it, it's going to feel like the best thing in the world. The Talaran, swift as the wind. I don't mind this one here. This is pretty good. Infantry units with this doctrine can advance and still shoot any weapon type except heavy weapons. When they do so, they do not suffer the usual penalties to hit rolls for assault weapons. Vehicles with this doctrine do not suffer the penalty to their hit rolls for moving and firing heavy weapons. If a Titanic vehicle with this doctrine advances, it treats all heavy weapons it's equipped with as assault weapons until the end of the turn.
That is
what I think about this?
Pretty good.
I like that it encourages Guard players to move around, and it rewards them for doing so. I feel like if I wanted to play Guard and feel like I'm engaging with people instead of just sitting around, this is the one that I would play.
I definitely agree with that statement. I think that, to just piggyback off that, the reason I like this rule so much is because it forces list design choices. If you're a Guard guy and you're like, all right, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to build this list?
Totally.
You have a glut of options, and you're like, well, what style do I want to play? And if you pick Talern as opposed to by way of example, so Talern has this great rule where if you're a Lehman, hypothetically, if you move, your sponson and hull-mounted weapons aren't taking the penalty for moving and shooting heavy weapons. That, as compared to the regimental trait that says, you aren't degrading as fast, that is a list designer's dream, right? Because you're like, these are two contrasting playstyle, two contrasting benefits. Would I rather have the ability to move and shoot effectively, or would I rather have the ability to sustain myself and to outlive my opponent? That's cool. That's game enhancing. It's not game breaking. It's not bad for the game. It's not overpowered. It's not quote unquote broken. It just gives players more options, and I love that.
It gives you that blitzkrieg kind of feel to your tank army. You know, if you really want to play tanks, like you said, you know, you can play with this blitzkrieg, very fast tank kind of style, or you can go with, you know, we're going to hunker down and just try to sit on objectives and survive it. So you got your Valhallans who can hold those backfield objectives, you know, forever, and then you got your Talons that can go out there and get in their face and get their opponent's objective. So it's which one do you want? Me, I might take a detachment of both. Who knows?
And for me, I mean, this wins the Captain Morgan seal of approval for most interesting Guard regiment for me. I'm not saying it's the most effective, but it's the one that makes me the most excited about maybe playing Guard.
Well, the Stormtroopers, the Militarum Tempestus. If a model with this doctrine is shooting at a target at half range or less, it can make an extra shot with the same weapon at the same target for each hit roll of a 6+ you make for that model. These extra shots do not themselves generate any more additional shots. Now remember, the Saiyans, you can include them as their own thing. You can have Scion detachments and have a Scion army, or you can include them in a regular AM army and they wouldn't get this.
Kind of like what we talked about in the last segment. With this, you're going to have an easy time just creating a regiment or a detachment, rather, of just these guys. So it kind of feels like you don't have a reason not to. At the same time, I'm not sure there's that great of a penalty in case you need to squeeze them into a different detachment.
Yeah,
you're not missing a lot.
So it's pretty good, I think, with an extra shot on a 6. You know, whatever. It's going to come up, and sometimes it's going to be with a really cool weapon.
I think that this is my favorite part about the change to Scions is that you know, basically the boogeyman lists that we've seen for the first 5 months of 8th edition, Scions have featured very prominently in those boogeyman guard lists, and I think that this codex really addresses those problems. It says, hey, you want to spam plasma, you're going to pay a lot more points for it, but it doesn't overly punish you in the sense that you can put these guys in whatever detachment you want, but if you really want these traits, you have to have their own. So again, it's a list design enhancement, and it addresses kind of the competitive complaints that had surfaced without being too heavy-handed.
Mordians and their parade drill is next. If the base of every model in an infantry unit with this doctrine is touching the base of at least one other model from the same unit, the unit has +1 leadership, and you can add 1 to hit rolls made for models in that unit when firing Overwatch. You can add 1 to hit rolls made for vehicles with this doctrine when firing Overwatch if they are within 3 inches of one or more other friendly Mordian vehicle.
I think this ends up being an accidental magic counter to stuff like Raven Guard assaults, or more importantly, stuff like Alpha Legion Berserkers, or even something like Orc Storm Boys. Anything that deep strike assaults is suddenly thinking twice about it with this. At the same time, those are the only armies that you're going to feel like you're really getting the benefit for your regimental doctrine out of. And in many other situations, you probably aren't going to use this.
I'm not a huge fan of it because it just, you know, it really wants you to bunch up your guys. You know, I like the Overwatch. That's nice, but I feel like I'm not going to get everything out of it, because when am I ever going to line my dudes up touching bases? Because my infantry, I want them spread out to bubble wrap and deny you deep strike.
So it's interesting. I think that Ricky, you kind of raised an interesting point, right? This particular rule in previous editions would have been terrible. It would have been ghastly. It would have been rejected out of hand. But because 8th edition, there are no template weapons, and you can choose what model dies when you're shot at, as opposed to, you know, you're pulling the front model, etc. 8th edition allows this rule to exist in a really fun and competitive way, such that you're trading off, like, hey, I want this bonus to my Overwatch role and leadership, as opposed to occupying more space. And so I think the cool thing about Mordians is that if you want conscripts or infantry blobs to occupy space and to just kind of stand out in front and to control board area, take a different regiment, right? Which you can do in a guard army. Like, hey, I'm going to take Cadian or Vestroyan conscripts as opposed to Mordians. But for the valuable stuff, if I'm going to take veterans, I'm going to take Mordian veterans, because they're going to overwatch better, they're going to have better leadership, and because their unique order is so powerful. So I'm actually a big fan of this particular trait. And I know I'm a freaking broken record at this point, but it's a great list designer option.
And it's going to look cool.
Yeah, that opinion that you're sharing there, you're not wrong, because this stuff is all good. And we're not saying that as a fanboy. It's like it really does have application. Like you can do something with this, with the tools in this book.
Yeah, certainly. It's more. It's not just that. Wow, this particular thing is good. I'm going to take 1,000 of it. Right, which has historically kind of been one of the big complaints about competitive 40k. It's like, oh, well, the Storm Raven is incredible. I'm going to take a bunch of those.
How many can I get?
How many can I get? Or the Wave Serpent's incredible. I'm going to take, how many of those can I get? Whereas this, it very much feels like a nuanced kind of massaging. All right, I want to fill this particular battlefield role. How can I best accomplish that? Okay, well, this X unit with X regiment is the best thing for this battlefield role. How can I fit that into my detachments? That's fun. That's awesome. As a list designer who's, my bread and butter has been, I want to write good competitive lists. That's exciting to me. To how to fit all those puzzle pieces together is awesome. And what enables that to happen is kind of these baseline underlining efficiencies of these guard units. No guard unit in and of itself is overpowered, but there's so much cohesion, there's so much synergy, and I think the good list designers are going to be able to mash these things together and just crush. It's going to be great.
And we're going to go over a few stratagems right now. I think relics and psychic powers we might go over in the next episode. Happy to talk about some of this stuff. And if you have any questions about stuff that how it maybe affects your army or whatever, maybe hit us up. We answer what we can. Cannot answer everything, of course, but what we can. Definitely things that we've covered in the show. But I want to talk about some of the stratagems right now. There's a couple of these that I think are crazy good. And I'll go with the one that I think is crazy good right now. Consolidate Squads. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Choose an infantry squad, page 93, from your army that is within 2 inches of another of your infantry squads from the same regiment. You can merge these squads into a single unit, and they are treated as such for the rest of the battle.
That's very. And how many command points?
That's
is that?
1 command point.
That is really, really not the worst. That is, I can't even.
Powers statement are astounding.
I mean, clearly it's situational. You have to have infantry squads, which is that's a unit. It's not the keyword infantry. That's the infantry squad on page 93. But there's no limit to how many times you can do this. This is not a pregame thing. This is just at the end of your movement phase. Burn a command point, merge some dudes into a squad. So in like a kill point game, you are denying your enemy kill points.
I will walk back my enthusiasm just a little bit. I didn't realize that we're actually talking about the unit entry infantry squad. I thought it was any
Not
infantry.
Just combine 90 conscripts together.
Yes. Okay. That's how I was hearing it in my head too. And I was like, that's awesome. I'll put, any sort of, psychic power on 90 conscripts, and that's super. Okay. Disregard.
In my brain, I was like, I'm going to combine 2 squads of veterans. Now I have 20 veterans. That's 6 grenade launchers and 2 las cannons. So yeah. All that said, my misinformation aside, that's still really, really strong. And it basically allows kind of the old school, obviously in 5th, 6th, 7th edition, you had infantry squads taken in platoons, such that before the game started, you could divvy up how you wanted these infantry squads to operate. This allows the same function. You just have to burn command points to do it. You say, hey, I want 20, 30 guys in one particular unit. Great, no problem. Then it just costs you command points. And I fully support that.
There's a stratagem here called jury rigging that lets you heal a vehicle 1 hull point, one wound at the start of your turn.
For 1 command point.
Yep. It cannot move, charge, or pile in, but it immediately heals 1 wound.
As long as it can still shoot, that's huge.
Yeah, you shoot, yeah.
Especially for the Valhallans, right? Because that functionally operates as 2 wounds.
2, yeah.
Vis-a-vis the degradation.
For 2 command points, there's an aerial spotter. Use this stratagem at the start of the shooting phase. Select a basilisk or wyvern model from your army. You can re-roll failed hit rolls for this unit in this phase.
Man, just basilisks and just wyverns?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to use that for the wyvern. Over the basilisk, I'll use it on the wyvern. That's definitely more shots.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Was it a single vehicle or all?
Yes, select
wyverns?
a basilisk or wyvern.
I mean, I could see it. Like, you really got to dig that one unit out and make sure that it happens. Yeah.
There's a preliminary bombardment. This one it sounds good, but it's 2 command points, and you roll a die for every unit that the enemy has deployed. On a 6, they take a single mortal wound.
That doesn't sound good at all.
Well, not if you're taking the mortal wounds, that's for sure. It's 2 command points, and the reason I'm less concerned about this being 2 command points is because I think you can make easy brigades with the guard.
Well, let me ask you that again. Did you say every roll a d6 for every unit or a d6 for every model?
Every unit. It's that old mission thing where there'd be a preliminary bombardment and a mission where you just go down the line and roll a die for every unit, and then something would happen on a 6.
Yeah, I remember that. And on a so
that happened in the
every
Warp
unit,
Storm chart as well.
Yeah, Warp Storm. Yep. Enemy unit on the battlefield on a 6, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. You can only use that once per battle. You can use this once per battle, and it says that in the strategy.
3 command points or 2?
2. It's 2 command points.
So that's worthwhile at 2 command points. If it was 3, I would kind of say ho hum. That's probably not worthwhile. But especially if you're playing against another high count army, just kind of you play those odds. Hey, I've got 18 drops. Well, okay, on average then, I can spend this thing. I can spend 2 command points and do an average of 3 mortal wounds. But the variance on that is real high. I could actually do a lot more than that. So not the worst. Certainly something that's worth taking.
Plus, you're playing Astra Militarum, so I'm in the mindset. I play smaller armies typically, so I have 4 command points for my whole game. And at ATC, when I played Astra Militarum, I was literally trying to come up with things to burn command points on. So, in a guard army, 2 command points is a drop in the bucket.
It's interesting you say that, because in 8th edition, I've never played a guard army that has more than 6 command points.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's
a lot.
And that's totally cool, and it's actually kind of worthwhile to discuss, because I have been playing veterans a lot. I've been playing a lot of veterans as opposed to I don't own a single conscript. I generally think that conscripts are a poor choice list design wise for guard armies. I've been called an idiot for that, but whatever. I don't take conscripts. I don't think they're good. And I don't take infantry squads. I take veterans. That's my preferred choice. And as a result of that, I'm not taking battalions. At ATC, for example, or the last 2 RTTs I've played in, I don't have a single troop choice in the whole army. And so these stratagems are going to force me and other players, guard players like me, I'm not such a rare breed, to really reconsider and say, hey, you've got a play style and you've got a list design kind of, set of parameters. Are these stratagems good enough to make you reconsider those?
Right.
Which I think is fun. Again, broken record. That's awesome from a list designer standpoint to say, you know what? Actually, these stratagems are going to be situationally useful enough that I'm not going to take these units that I otherwise would have taken.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just one more thing. The list design thing is we don't have the mono build anymore, and that's my favorite thing about 8th is there's so much variety in what we can do, and this just like what you're saying there, because you and I had very different lists at ATC. And we both did quite well. I think you placed higher than I did. I looked because I was trying to prove you wrong on the veteran thing, but you did place higher than I did. But I like that, even though you had a very strong list, now we can come back and be like, well, is do we need to take another look at it and see if these stratagems and stuff are going to outweigh the benefits that you're getting out of going pure veteran squad. So it's fun because we get to have a lot more fun outside of our games, just working on lists and thinking about it, as opposed to just getting our list set and then going and trying to win games with it. Now we get to really work afterwards too.
I totally agree with everything you just said. I will say it's not going to be any fun for our opponents.
Well, there's 100 different ways to build these guard lists. I mean, that's what we're talking about, and this is a codex review, and I get it. We're talking about some things or whatever and expounding on things, but there's still, we haven't even gotten to all the different options and talked about what the build to end all builds is. And I don't know that there is one. I'm just saying that we're not anywhere near discussing that.
Yeah, I guess the situation is that there were 100 ways to build guard in the index.
Yeah, before,
and now there are still 100 different ways to play guard, but all of them got better.
That is true.
And they got better, in unique and situational ways, such that it's going to be worthwhile poring over them and deciding which models to build and which models to take. Which actually, I don't know, Paul, if this is the time or the place to discuss it, about whether or not, will these Cadians count as Mordians?
We're going to talk about, let's talk about more guard on the next show. I mean, there is just so much to discuss, and that's a style question that I think could use a little bit of waxing on about it and people getting their ideas, but that's something to pose out to anyone. And I've already seen a lot of vitriol on the internet about that Cadians are going to become the new White Scars. These are my brown Cadian Talara, and these are my
and here's the thing. Like, I understand where people are coming from on that, and I understand both sides of it, but at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that Cadians are the only ones out there that really have a strong range. So can you really fault, that player who's like, well, these are the models that I have, not everybody.
We will cover that on the next show, but that's a good point. There's 20 something stratagems in here, and that includes a specific stratagem for each of the regiments themselves. And those, I'm willing to bet those will be leaked on the Warhammer community site. But I'm pretty pumped about these vicious traps from the Catechins. They use this stratagem when an enemy unit finishes a charge move within 1 inch of a Catechin unit from your army that is wholly or within a terrain feature. That is wholly on or within a terrain feature. Roll a dice. On a 4+, that enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds.
Yeah, I mean, that could turn the battle for you right there.
That's a one command
point.
Combat,
yeah.
That's a 1 command point stratagem.
The real value of that is when you'll see super elite armies or single model units. If I'm going to charge you with a dreadnought. All right, dude. Hope you roll that 4+. That dreadnought doesn't want to be eaten.
Because then my Street 4 Catechins with their knives are going to beat you down.
My death company don't want anything to do with that.
Exactly right. And so those single wound models obviously don't want to be eating that. High point single wound models don't want to be eating that. And
this is after you've eaten the Overwatch. They're going to get Overwatch fire and these vicious traps.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's not anything that it also could be a non-factor.
Yeah, you're right. But
right, so,
I live the dream of where this just all works.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like, well, I'm taking Catechins anyway because of their other erstwhile great traits.
And their models are awesome.
And lo and behold, this is gravy, right? So how can you complain, or how can you even critique this? You're like, oh, this is.
Oh, it's only on a 4+, and you spit the command point. Who cares?
Yeah,
It's the gift bag under your seat is what Vicious Traps is. It's like, you already got into the show, you got your tickets, you got in there, good seats, and here we go. Vicious Traps, it's great.
So on the next show, we'll talk more about these stratagems specific to the regiments. We'll go over the psychic powers and the relics, and maybe talk about some builds that we've had a chance to kind of brew in between this show and the next one.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Guys, thanks for hanging in for this really long codex review. But again, there's just a ton of stuff here. This is probably the best codex they've come out with so far, if you ask me. I mean, that's even comparing it to the options in the Marine list. And I think it's going to give everything out there a run for its money, like Guard already do, and they're just getting better.
Yeah, I mean, it's my cup runneth over of good stuff.
I'm going to steal my 8-year-old's army and just tell him to deal with it.
There's no question. It's Christmas come early for Guard players, and everything got better. Nothing got worse except for the things that probably needed to be dealt with anyway.
Warlord traits. We're going to talk about Warlord. Every regiment has its own specific Warlord trait you can pick, too. So, I mean, there's tons of customization you can do here. Anyway, I could just keep talking.
Great.
Yeah, you guys have a good rest of your night, and we will talk more about this very soon.
Sounds good.
Good night, team.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.